the U.S., quote, entering the war and bombing Iran directly. The war was already going on.
Iran, from my perspective, unbelievably embarrassing. The regime in Iran is much more concerned about maintaining control within Iran rather than making an impression on the world stage that they're actually a global power.
We live in a world where people want to make like short-term hard takes on how things are going to play out. We just don't know.
So take out the geopolitics, take out everything going on in the world. Oil's just cheap right now.
That is kind of the core of the art of the deal. You mix things up, you throw it in the blender, and honestly, I don't think he knows what's going to come out of it.
If people were holding stablecoins did have access to that yield, there's no use for banks at all, because that's what banks do. They offer a return on your capital by holding money.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. This podcast, we dive into the world of investing, geopolitics, adventure, business, entrepreneurship, all the different things. My name is Austin Bronner. I'm here with my co-host, Cody Shirk. Cody, how are you doing, man?
It's been a long week for everyone, right? The world has been through a roller coaster of emotions. And I don't know what to say. I mean, we're going to dive into it today and get into all the juicy details, but I don't know. I had a lot of lessons learned this week for me personally. A lot of lessons learned, I think, for a lot of different people around the world. But I do think that the one thing the world needs is to go to a Joe Dispenza retreat. So tell us how that was, because you just got back, right?
Yeah, I was pretty much completely disconnected this last week from any of the news, which was actually wonderful.
Great week to be disconnected. I think maybe going into it, you're like, oh God, I'm disconnected. But I'll tell you, as someone who's in the trenches, I'm jealous of you.
Yeah, it was great. It's a really interesting event. I think if you don't know anything about Joe Dispenza, at the core, a lot of what he talks about is and shares his meditations and ideas for like changing your energy and your state. And a lot of the, I guess, fame or the things that have made him really popular are really miraculous stories of healing that people have experienced. And the event's about 2,100 people. And very quickly, I'll just share one or two of the things that was the most interesting. Like the first day I was sitting there and I met a guy who's sitting next to me who was about 55 years old. I was like, how did you find Joe Dispenza? He was like, well, I was kind of forced to. I got brain cancer 9 years ago, a tumor, and had surgery and removed the tumor. Went back in for scans 2 years later and it had come back. And I was like, I do not want to go back through brain surgery again, like the gnarliness of brain surgery. I'm not doing it again. And so he said he started to do Joe Dispenza's meditations every single day. He's done them every single day for at least 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes 2 hours for the last 7 years. And he went back in for scans. After doing it for 6 or 8 months, the tumor was completely gone. And he has continued this process. He goes to a retreat every 2 years just to remind him how far he's come. And this guy's a savage. Owns like 4 businesses in Romania. He's got a family, super fit, healthy. And he does this, and this is what helped him to completely remove the cancer. And a lot of what he talks about is that it actually, the person that he became is the person who could heal from cancer. So the person who got the cancer was this uptight, super stressed out, type A, intense person. And the person on the other side of the meditations was a more relaxed person that could heal.
So is this like a mind over matter thing, or more of what you just said, which is like shifting your mindset to be healthier internally and then your body becomes healthy? Or I guess that's kind of the same thing, right?
Well, I think the big question I walk away from the event, and what most people do, is there's a lot of scientists that are there studying it. They're tracking people with, bio trackers, taking blood, trying to understand what's happening. Like, why are people who are really sick going in and leaving healed or in a much better state. And a lot of it is that whatever is going on in your body, like energy wise or frequency wise, whatever's creating the disease, in order to heal the disease, you need to change that energy or frequency. And once you do that, your body is able to actually heal. In like a very, or like, let's just say like a lot, you are very stressed out, angry, all those different things. And you always think that the world is going to be negative towards you. If you're putting that energy out, then the world is going to feel that way and it's going to respond that way. Right. So a lot of things are self-fulfilling.
So why'd you go?
Well, because I've been doing his meditations for years and they've,
oh, you have?
For years. Okay. Completely changed my life. For the positive. So I've wanted to go to one of these retreats for a long time. And, I fully believe that like the energy you put out into the world is the energy you receive. Right. And it's like at the core, like that's one of my biggest core beliefs. And that the best way to change your life is to really focus on the energy that you put out and touch other people with.
So those meditations, are they free? The ones that you were doing before you went to where do you find it? Is it like a podcast or YouTube or something?
You can find them. You can go on Spotify, search Joe Dispenza Meditations. There's a bunch of them. You can buy them from his website. You can go to YouTube. They're everywhere. The guy's pretty big. So
do you want to share your affiliate code? So
I got no affiliate. I got no affiliate. And honestly, I don't even really like I don't even really like talking about that much because I think it's like out there enough for people that some people are like, I don't know, it feels like too woo woo or whatever. But I think it's worthwhile because if somebody's interested, they can go check it out and maybe.
No, I'm giving you a hard time. I'm like, I've never been, but I don't doubt the success that certain people have. And I think also when someone's hit rock bottom, whether it's a health issue or a mental health issue or an addiction or whatever, like, what's the harm of trying something that it's worked for other people? Like, there's no harm in doing it, so go for it.
Totally. And not only that, but I think like I was there. I've had skin issues on and off for years. Go in with some level of inflammation, leave with zero. Like I don't know how to explain it. It's just that's the reality of what happened. Met multiple people that their whole body was covered in eczema before the retreat. Gone by the end. It's interesting. So I don't know. No, I think we're still learning. I think we know so little about the human body, right? Yeah. And but anyway, I want to get into like what is going on, which is the exact polar opposite of what I was doing.
Yeah.
Which is we had an episode previously talking about the war trades. Yeah. How do you feel like you did on that?
Well, I feel really stupid talking about this after we just talked about like all the good things you should be doing to your body. All right, I don't want to dive into the details of everything that happened over the weekend because everybody knows what happened. This was probably the most publicized, in-depth, tracked world event ever. And what I mean by that is that you could have gone on
the
X.
Volume of media.
Yeah, I mean the media,
reporting on it.
The traditional media was reporting on it, but then you could take like one layer deeper and go on X or any social account and watch like the flight trackers and watch, the like second or third layer operations that were going on. That's pretty public now. So I think everybody or many people were watching what was going on. So I won't dive into that because I would just be in an echo chamber of what everybody knows. But I will say before we dive in, I am 1 for 3 on Trump trade. So what I mean by that is as an investor, I'm typically a long-term investor. I don't really make like short-term bets or anything. I'm not even a gambler. I've never even gambled in my life, like in Vegas or anything. I probably should.
You've never gambled?
No, I've never like pulled a slot.
You never placed one bet?
No, I haven't. I played poker with friends and done that, but no, like
okay.
I've never gone to Vegas and like put money on the line and done all that. It's not really attractive to me. But I say that because I've done 3 event-driven trades based around Trump. 2 of them have been around some election stuff, and the most recent one was this past weekend. And I've gotten smoked on 2 out of the 3. So I totally whiffed this weekend, and I won't go into my exact trade, but it was basically some oil trades, and I did some hedging so I wouldn't be too it wasn't too much risk, but I was positioned for a lot of upside. And this whole thing happened over the weekend, and I ended up with like I lost a little money, like a couple $100. But in the scheme of things, I was up like huge and then back down. It was like this whipsaw event that I was, you know,
Yeah.
in the heat of the moment, and the whole thing ended up, and I was basically back to where I started, and just a reminder that I should not do that. I should just go to the Cancun and hang out with Joe Dispenza instead of trying to trade these Trump things. So, a couple more lessons, just because I think it's important nowadays with so much more social media and data information. Two lessons that I learned. One specifically about Trump is that his path to success is chaotic, unpredictable, and nearly impossible to bet on. I think traditional politicians, traditional geopolitical strategists, traditional ways that the world has gone is more or less like this path that you can kind of predict. You might get things here or there wrong, but you can kind of see where things are going. Trump's just totally unpredictable. And I think maybe he highlights this scenario of more information in the world, social media, etc. He's like the epitome of it, but I think it's also where the world's going in general. So the other lesson learned is that his negotiating style specifically is fast, it's messy, and he goes for the final deal as quickly as possible, which is again the complete opposite of traditional politics, which it's usually this long drawn out negotiation. And it's
Yeah.
not just war. I'm talking with trade, I'm talking with a bureaucracy. It's usually this like multi-year thing, and he gets it done in like 3 days, and it's messy and it's chaotic and it's not perfect, but it's
And sometimes it looks like it's going to completely blow up.
totally. And
And
by the
sometimes
way,
it does blow up.
I'm not even predicting that it's over yet. I don't know what's going on, but I just know
Totally.
that this is like unfamiliar territory for everybody, and it's taking everybody just by surprise. And if you watch the traditional media, if you watch influencers on social media, if you listen to podcasts, I don't think anybody got this correct. And there's a lot of people eating crow right now, and there's a lot of people kind of like talking in circles. I guess I am a little bit right now, which is just trying to rationalize what's going on and
Yeah.
try to put it in context, and it's nearly impossible. So the biggest lesson here, I've just listed all these things, is just be a long-term investor, go for things that are clear trends, and stop getting stuck in the noise. And that should hopefully put you on a path to success. So I don't know if you
I
got
think
stuck in any of that this weekend. It sounds like you didn't, but you didn't miss anything.
Well, I wasn't trading anything. I think I've got like like a long term plays. I think the part that I find the most interesting of this, and you might or may not resonate with it, is that what I find interesting is we have old words, old thinking to describe new actions, and old institutions that are trying to keep up with like new styles of warfare, new styles of conflict, and they don't really match up with what's going on. This example of the U.S. quote entering the war and bombing Iran directly, right? The war is already going on. The war is already going on. This isn't a new war. Like even this whole idea of like the 12-day war or whatever, it's like it's not been a 12-day war. The war is continued. It's just an escalation over the line that people actually care about. So the moment that you see a big bomb drop, or you see like traditional signals of war, it ticks on something in people's brains. It ticks on something in the media, and then they report on it as something different. But the reality is that this war has been going on. America has been involved. Iran's been involved. Russia's been involved. There's been a war going on, and this is just an escalation. And so I think it breaks the brains and it breaks the institutions when they're trying to understand how to report on something, because it's not like World War II where we've entered the war, we're fully in. It's not like that at all. I don't even know how to think about it, right? Like
Well, yeah, well,
it's just
let's
different.
dive into that, and let's go into some of
Yeah.
the predictions we had, because I think, and overall, I provided most of predictions last week, and they mostly revolved around oil because it was the most obvious and was the easiest to talk about. We talked about some other ones. We actually nailed one of them. We're going to talk about in just a little bit, where we were spot on about one of our predictions. But let's just talk about oil for a second, because this is the whipsaw motion we saw over the weekend. We'll fast forward to right now. Oil is trading currently. We're in the week of June. How was it? We're going to publish this June 26th. So oil is trading almost exactly where it was prior to this whole thing breaking out. So like we're talking about a couple weeks ago, oil is back to where it was before then. And I just think this is very interesting, because the reality with oil right now, I'm going to throw a chart up right now, is that historically speaking, over the past 30, 40, 50 years, on an inflation adjusted perspective, oil is actually cheaper right now than the average inflation adjusted price. So take out the geopolitics, take out everything going on in the world. Oil's just cheap right now, generally speaking. And I think it's an interesting value play. So the fact that people were shorting oil, or oil has gone down so much over this whole geopolitical event, is just very bizarre to me. It's very strange, because again, if you take away the geopolitical event, it's just a value play in general, but also our world is becoming more electrified. The demand for electricity, which is primarily, fueled by petrochemicals, and our world is fueled by petrochemicals, plastics, etc., needs oil. So this idea that we're still in this value area for petroleum is just bizarre to me. It's a very interesting situation. So I think right now, and this is me speaking this week, which is oil to this huge whipsaw of the weekend, I think it's actually an interesting investment right now, because people are so bearish on it. So as a long-term play, I think oil is very interesting. I just said oil like 30 times in a row, so I think I'm done with oil. What's your thoughts on oil?
I mean, I think I had an interesting realization over the last week that I was thinking about kind of when we look at history, we've got the Stone Age, the Golden Age, all these different. We're living in the petroleum age.
Yeah,
that's what it'll be looked back on. In 1,000 years, they'll be like, "This is the petroleum age," and yeah, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, it's very confusing. You would expect oil to go up. It went down. It stayed the same, and I just don't see a future I don't see a near term future where there's not increased demand for oil. Just think about the number of people that are going to be demanding the experience of the Western world, right? I think we talked on a previous podcast, or you and I have talked, I can't remember if it was a text or whatnot, that the number of people Africa is going to double in population. India is growing. Like the number of Indonesia, there's just more and more people coming into the world that want to have a Western style of life. Western style of life involves a lot of petroleum.
Yep.
Whether it's for pretty much everything around you. So I don't know. Seems like a long-term play.
Yeah, like I said, I was talking about it being a value play prior to all this, and it's now cheaper than when we started. So it's a head scratcher for me. So
that's why long-term investing is, I don't know. It feels like one of those things that can be frustrating, but you can't have a short-term timeline on a long-term investment.
Yeah, I mean, Warren Buffett's pretty much gotten his teeth kicked in on his Occidental trade. But hey, he'll probably be right in the long run, even though he's probably fallen off his pedestal. I still think he's got the magic in that long-term thinking. All right, let's go to the next one. We did a bunch of like second order things that would happen because of oil, but we'll just skip all that. Let's go to the Qatar issue, because I think this is so fascinating. And I'll give a quick summary. Everyone knows this, but just give a quick summary, is that Iran was going to retaliate against the U.S. for these bunker busters, and Iran chose to target a couple of U.S. military bases. The main one that they targeted was the base in Qatar. And Iran told Qatar before they launched this attack, and then Qatar told the U.S. it was happening. And we saw this in real time, actually days prior to the attack, that the U.S. completely abandoned the base in Qatar. And so obviously Iran did this to save face. I don't want to dive into the tit for tat, because it's pretty clear what happened there. I just think that it's interesting what Qatar's doing, because they're positioning themselves as the go-between for the West and the Middle East. And the fact is that the Saudis don't like Iran, so they're not really a trusted middle party.
No.
And not that I'm not saying like the Qatar is trusted, but they are serving a very, very
I think they're trying to
role.
build trust is what they're doing.
They are, but I just don't believe you can build trust by balancing the line of two enemies or two people that or two parties that view the world in diabolically different perspectives, and it's just
Yeah.
impossible to gain trust on both sides because who are you really aligned to? But the point is, last week we made the prediction that the big winner would be Qatar, and we were right. I think they're going to be the big winner here because they more or less allowed Iran to bomb their sovereign soil, which was actually the U.S. military base, as just more of like a strategy in their strategic long-term thinking of, okay, we'll increase our strength with the U.S. relations because we told the U.S. what Iran's doing, and we're also increasing our strength with Iran because we're allowing.
And I would argue they're gaining trust from both sides.
Yes, I agree. And so you're
Yeah.
right on that regard. I just mean as far as like actually trusting what they're going to say or what they're going to do or what is actually going on internally. And they're also hosting Hamas and all that. As a side note, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis didn't get involved at all in this skirmish. So very interesting all the way around. But I do want to at least acknowledge that you and I did call the Qatar situation. So we win on that point, but didn't make any money from it.
No money made. One of my biggest questions, and I think through the fog of war, and I think the question everybody's asking is how like demolished has the Iranian military and their proxies been, right? Israel's been on a warpath and they've been destroying Air Force bases, defenses, they've taken out leadership at all levels through Iran's proxies, through their actual military at all levels. And it is the question I have in my head, and I think a lot of people have, is like, maybe they're just they've been castrated by Israel. We don't know, right? I don't, and this is where a lot of the long-term stuff is very interesting to me. I think we live in a world where people want to make like short-term hard takes on how things are going to play out, but we just don't know.
Yeah.
We're not going to know for 5 years.
The big takeaway for Iran, from my perspective, is it was unbelievably embarrassing for them. And
yeah,
what was revealed from my perspective is that the regime in Iran is much more concerned about maintaining control within Iran rather than making an impression on the world stage that they're actually a global power. And that actually contradicts the whole uranium nuclear issue, which is that they're this threat to the world if they get a nuclear weapon. I'm not saying they are or aren't. I'm just saying that they've shown they're much more concerned about maintaining control in their sovereign land versus trying to make impacts around the world with whatever trade or policies that they want to push upon people. They basically completely folded like a beach lawn chair and decided to just say, you know what, we're much more concerned with maintaining the regime here instead of making a statement to the world. So
my take on that is it's actually even more important to keep them from getting a bomb, because if they did have it, then they would be a player. The moment you have it, you're a player.
Sure. Yeah, I think you could go that way as well. I also just note, I mean, I'm very patriotic as a U.S. citizen. I'm very pro-U.S., and I've gone full circle as a libertarian, originally thinking the world would live in peace. Everybody just stays out of everyone's hair. I'm more leaning to the side that, you know what, the world actually needs a powerful leader, because if you don't have a powerful leader, you end up with these different factions and just this gridlock of kind of chaos and conflict around the world. So I generally agree with what the U.S. is doing, which I didn't used to believe 10, 20 years ago. Where was I going with that? Where I was going with that is that the whole thing with the uranium and all this, it's just the story's not done. And I guess people like to put a bow on it, like you said, could jump to a conclusion. But
well, like it's a good example of like there's such a desire for politicians on both sides, or just people who are aligned with some sort of a political ideology, to like make statements in real time on social media about what they think is going to happen, whether it's good or it's bad. And there's a belief that I have, which is conflict equals energy, right? And whenever there's conflict, there's energy created, and that energy can go one way or the other. And this is where I think the Trump thing is so fascinating, and why it's so hard to predict, and why people lose their shirt on trades, because he creates massive amounts of conflict, and that conflict creates massive amounts of energy, and that energy can go to peace or it can go to escalated war. And we don't know. And it's going to take a while for this to play out, but it's the reason why stuff can get done in 3 days that doesn't happen in 3 years or 30 years, because it's massive amounts of conflict, which creates massive amounts of energy. And then that energy can shift and it can change things so fast.
Art of the deal, baby.
Art of the deal. But it's interesting because it works in so many different ways. Like I'm almost everybody can relate to this on a personal level. It's like when you have a conflict with somebody, that conflict doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome is going to be negative, right? The conflict could actually lead to more closeness with a person,
Yep.
right? The conflict can be the thing that leads to a breakthrough in a relationship, or it can lead to the end of the relationship. You just don't know. It depends on how you handle it one way or the other. And I think that is kind of the core of the art of the deal. It's like you mix things up, you throw it in the blender, and honestly, I don't think he knows what's going to come out of it.
Yeah. Well, hey, he's the master of flying by the seat of his pants. I'll give him
Yeah.
that. So the two other countries you mentioned, we mentioned Turkey and India being probably second and third or somewhere in there important. We both said that Qatar would be the most important. Turkey didn't really do much other than kind of offer to have some negotiations in Istanbul to sort out what's going on here. I actually think that may happen in the coming months. I think Turkey will get more involved, and then India, the big like kind of vacuum of silence. Nothing from Modi, nothing from India, and this is more credit to Modi of just doing very
Keep your
good.
head down.
Yes, keep your head down. And if I was in India right now looking at, my leader, which was Modi, I'd be pretty happy with him not getting entangled in all this, because Putin and everybody kind of had something to say about Israel and Iran, and India is kind of nowhere to be seen, even though they're the largest country in the world by population. So again, more credit to Modi for being patient and not getting involved in things he shouldn't be involved in.
Well, speaking of conflict creating energy and chaos, crypto markets went on a wild ride this last week. They've rebounded pretty much to like where they started a week ago, right? And again, crypto is almost the most pure reflection of the market because it's 24/7 trading, and it's like you can see things happening in real time. It's like that in Poly Market, right? Are like the places you can go for just like real time responses one way or the other. It's also why people make a lot of money trading.
Totally. So I have a tweet or a post on X I want to show, because I did this about 10, 12, 13 days ago. Anyways, I said Bitcoin short term is a global liquidity pool, which I'll come back to in a second. And then long term, it's a hedge against increasing money supply, inflation, and authoritarianism and centralization. And that's it. Like, that's really how you should be looking at Bitcoin. And going back to the short term, which is this global liquidity pool, is exactly what you said. We had crypto pull back over the weekend, and I would argue that wasn't people selling Bitcoin for fear. That was people selling crypto to get liquidity to play into oil or whatever they thought was going to happen. And like you said,
just to raise cash.
Yes.
For whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you think of a global liquidity pool, which has traditionally been gold, or it's been actual fiat money to buy things, those things are not tradable 24/7. I mean, you could, but on a very, very archaic, clunky way that's just not efficient. Bitcoin pretty much solves that exactly. And the way it played out over the weekend, Bitcoin's back up in the mid 100, 105, 106,000 right now, back to where we started, and it served its purpose over the weekend. So I think that people who are skeptical of Bitcoin or don't understand crypto, this may be the easiest way to look at it and say it's serving a purpose right now beyond preserving wealth. It's a liquidity pool, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and that's also where it can be confusing from, that's why you have to look at it outside of just what's happening in the US with money printing. It's like when China prints money, where does that excess liquidity go?
Crypto.
Into crypto.
And who benefits from that? There. People who aren't even in China, which is wild.
Exactly.
It's perfect. It's perfect if you think about it. So the risk of China printing more money, or the US or Europe or anywhere, everyone is kind of hedged by having crypto. It's wild. It's almost as if every year crypto becomes more and more, Bitcoin specifically becomes more and more useful and makes more sense. It's almost scary how much sense it's making.
Especially because for so long people were like, this doesn't make sense, right? Like, what purpose does it serve? What purpose does it serve? And people who got it early were like, no, it's gold, right? It's gold. Just think of it as gold. And like, okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that it's again serves this global liquidity pool, and yeah.
Well,
Well,
crypto's confusing because most people say go read the white paper and then go read this 300-page book that so-and-so author put out about crypto, and then go read about the Federal Reserve. And I mean, you got to spend like 2 years becoming like an economist or getting your MBA in economics to understand what crypto is. But the reality, like you said, is just it's a liquidity pool for the world.
yeah, and if you do want to go into a book, the Bitcoin Standard is a great book that talks about this exact thing. But speaking of crypto, the U.S. Director of Federal Housing, the FHFA, William Pulte, I think is how you say it,
Yep.
is thinking about incorporating crypto holdings as collateral for real estate purchases. Very, very, very interesting. So, and then we'll put up a couple of tweets here. One from Michael Saylor, who says, we've developed a Bitcoin credit model that we are happy to share. It takes into account loan duration, collateral coverage, Bitcoin price, Bitcoin volatility, Bitcoin ARR outlook to generate a statistical Bitcoin risk and Bitcoin credit spreads. So you can look at his website there. So very interesting because as we talked about, like people are holding wealth in Bitcoin, having that as collateral. What do you think this leads to?
This is a big threat for the banks. I think the banks are terrified about it. So we just had the Genius Act in Congress. It's going through right now, and it's I think it passed, right?
I don't know. I've not been following.
Well, anyways, it's highly likely to get through. But the main point is that in this whole thing, there's a part of the Genius Act that talks about stable coins, and I'm kind of going off topic, but I'm gonna bring it back around here, which is stable coins like Tether. They buy U.S. Treasuries, which have a yield on it, right? And then Tether supposedly backs each one of their tokens with $1. So Tether is printing money because they're getting yield by holding these U.S. Treasuries. And part of the argument is, okay, if you're holding these stable coins, you should be exposed to the yield. Why is Tether capturing these gains, and why isn't the holder of the asset not capturing these gains? And in the Genius Act, it says, no, if you're holding stablecoin, you cannot have access to this upside. And a lot of people are pissed about it, and myself included. I'm like, that's bullshit. It shouldn't be that way. If you're holding the stablecoin, you should have access to the gain you're getting.
Just to go through that one more time, just to be really clear about what this means.
Summarize it clearer.
Yeah. So when you talk about the stable coins, right, and you're talking about Tether.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
or USDC, all of them.
Or USDC.
But Tether is the biggest one.
So they're saying that they're holding the equivalent number of treasuries for the equivalent number of USD. Like example, USDC has the equivalent number of treasuries, right?
Correct.
And they're making money. Go ahead.
And USDC, by the way, went public, which is Circle is the company, and their stock price has ripped. It's probably the best performing IPO in a very long time. And it's because they're making money off the treasuries they're holding. So they're issuing stable coins backed by US dollar, but the company that does this, Circle for USD or Tether for Tether, is printing money. Tether made like $14 billion last year in pure profits with like, what do we say, like less than 100 employees? It's a massively profitable company.
Profitable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the way that they're making the money, just to be clear about this, is that they hold the treasury, so they get a yield on that. They're offering a yield to people who hold, let's say, USDC, right?
No, they're not. Well, they're not.
They're not offering any.
So in the Genius Act, it specifically says the person who holds USDC does not have exposure to that yield. And what I'm bringing this all back around to with the housing thing is that the banks specifically lobbied for the Genius Act to include this, because if people were holding stable coins did have access to that yield, there's no use for banks at all, because that's what banks do. They offer a return on your capital by holding money. Yeah. So banks specifically lobbied in the Genius Act to prevent this from happening. And I think it's very important for people to understand, because it's kind of like the Trojan horse, which is, okay, we're just going to get the stable coins in to be regulated within the United States and the global financial system. And the next step is banks are screwed. So for right now, banks are protecting themselves, and they lobbied hard to make sure that this is part of the Genius Act, where stablecoin holders did not have exposure to the gain. But it's very, very clear that in the coming years, that's going to be circumvented, and people who do actually hold stablecoins will get exposure to to the yield that's backing up the collateralizing those
just to be
stablecoins.
clear on this one point, which is, so if you hold USDC in Coinbase, you can stake it and get a yield.
That's through Coinbase, though,
That's
specifically.
through Coinbase.
Yes.
Okay. And so just to understand, why is Coinbase offering that?
Coinbase is offering that because they're almost acting like as a bank. They want you to put your money onto their platform.
For them to hold it so that they can then loan it to other people.
Yeah, or they can do whatever they do in the back end there.
Yeah.
So again, this is just the canary in the coal mine for me looking at this, saying the banks are in big trouble. So anyways, bringing it back to the housing market, and this is where it's important. What Pulte is saying, Pulte, by the way, is the grandson of Old Man Pulte, who's Pulte Homes, one of the largest home builders in the United States. They know real estate. They know housing arguably better than anybody. That's been their business for generations. What Pulte is saying is that they are going to be looking, when I say he is part of the U.S. government now. The U.S. government is going to be looking at collateralizing your loan for a home with a crypto you own. And that is going to be huge because now all of a sudden, let's say you had one Bitcoin, just for a round number, worth $100,000 right now. Okay. Well, they are saying that they're looking into using that crypto holding you have as collateral to whatever loan you take out for real estate you purchase. And that's the big problem right now in the United States, which is specifically millennials and younger. A lot of millennials and younger actually have relatively large crypto holdings relative to their net worth, but they can't go to a bank and get a home loan because they're using the traditional banking system, and the bank is looking at your income, they're looking at your debt to income ratio, and they don't care about crypto at all. The traditional bank is not looking at your crypto holdings at all. So Pulte is saying, hey, maybe the US government should look at your crypto holdings. Maybe we should allow you to collateralize your loan with the crypto holdings you have. And if that happens, I mean, he's saying it's going to happen, or at least they're looking into it. I think that could open up a whole new avenue for new home buyers to purchase real estate in the U.S. So immediately you say, oh, that's bullish for U.S. because there's going to be a whole new batch of buyers. Of course, just to play devil's advocate here, there's clearly a whole new risk, which is, are real estate prices going to stay where they are or go up even higher because now you have a new pool of buyers? And is that going to inflate this real estate bubble even more? I don't know. I just think it's very interesting that there's this new system that's becoming available and the U.S. government's seriously looking at it to allow access for people to buy real estate with collateral that was never at all acknowledged or even legal in the U.S. It's incredible. We're living in incredible times right now.
It's moving fast. And yeah, just an example would be like if you had 10 Bitcoin worth $1 million and then you just say stake those and have some yield off of that, you could collateralize a loan, pay the loan with the yield from your asset, and then be able to buy a house and have a traditional mortgage style where you're paying monthly for it, and all through your staked Bitcoin.
Exactly. And Coinbase actually does this right now. They launched it about a month ago, which is these loans. So you can take a loan from your crypto in Coinbase with an 86% loan to value ratio. And the current rate is 5%, which is lower than a traditional home loan right now. So if you had $1 million worth of crypto, you could borrow up to $860,000. And if the price of Bitcoin goes up, well, then that's good for you because your collateral increased. But if the price of Bitcoin goes down, Coinbase can collect on the collateral you have instantaneously. It's an algorithm. We'll just take your collateral. And of course, that's a huge risk. And also the interest rate, which is currently at 5%, is adjustable. So depending on market dynamics, meaning if there's a higher increase to lend or borrow that capital, the interest rate is adjustable. So there's definitely risk here. But the point is that Coinbase is already offering this on their platform on their own. So if the US government starts to adopt that for the housing market, this could be transformational for the crypto market, and watch out below for the banks. The banks are going to be, they're already sweating it, and that's why they've been so against it. They're just trying to position themselves right now. That's why JP Morgan, everybody is, and BlackRock, that's why they've jumped into crypto, because they've realized if we do not adopt this, or at least create some sort of system where we're interacting with crypto, we're going to be in deep trouble.
There's going to be new banks that pop up. Effectively.
Yeah, or no banks. We're just going to be decentralized financing globally. And it's going to be peer-to-peer borrowing and lending and commerce. And the banks are going to be squeezed out of all of it, which I think eventually will be. I don't know if that's next year, 10 years from now, or 100 years from now. That's what's going to happen in my mind.
Yeah. it is very, very interesting and exciting, and things are moving fast. I want to move and talk about something that I've been following, which is we've both been talking a little bit about this, but it's the New York City uh, race for mayor and what's going on right now. And so New York City is holding its the primary for the Democratic mayoral primary on today. We're recording this June 24th, so today. This is for the Democratic primary candidate. There's 11 candidates on the ballot. The Republican candidate, they're running unopposed. But if you just look at New York City, really the race is for the Democratic. Like this is the real race because they're probably just going to win.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But traditionally, that's been the way it's gone.
Yep. So it's just like California. Like California is just assumed to be blue for the presidential race.
Whoever
You just know.
whoever the Democratic mayor is, that candidate's probably going to win. So the city uses ranked choice voting, allowing voters to rank up to 5 candidates by preference. And the two frontrunners are Andrew Cuomo, the former New York governor, who is, I'm going to say, disgraced, or he left because of sexual harassment charges. And then a guy named Zohran Mamdani, who's a progressive state assemblyman from Queens. The reason this is interesting is that these two candidates could not be more different, and they really, it's whoever wins this is going to be whoever wins is going to actually like paint the picture of which direction New York City is going to go. It's going to be very different, and especially Mamdani. Mamdani's young. He is very, very progressive. Some of his policies include free public transportation, so free buses, universal child care, rent freezes and subsidized housing, city-run grocery stores to keep prices low. He wants to build 200,000 affordable housing units and freeze rents on all rent-stabilized apartments. He wants to raise corporate taxes to 11.5%, impose a 2% tax on anyone earning over $1 million annually. He wants to, like, quote, defund the police and create a Department of Community Safety that takes traditional policing funding and moves it to mental health and violence prevention services. And he's talked about Trump-proofing New York City. So
basically, he's a communist.
But I mean, he's the furthest left candidate that has ever made it to, at least my understanding, made it to like almost be a front runner here. And the part that I find the most interesting, and I want to go through this a little bit, is ranked choice voting, because this is something that's confusing, and I had to really dive. I didn't know much about it, but I did kind of a deep dive to understand why ranked choice actually can lead to some really surprising outcomes. Because right now, it's a very close race. Cuomo's up by in polls by like 2%. But that doesn't mean that he's actually going to win, because the way that ranked choice, do you understand ranked choice?
Yeah, I looked at the table. It shows like when you have 5 candidates, and then those other candidates can take away votes from the front runner, not because they're literally taking votes away, but because people are voting for essentially a candidate that's not actually going to be the final selection.
Votes don't go away. They can only be added.
Mm-hmm.
But the part that's interesting is just to give kind of an example. So the way it works is all ballots are counted for voters' first choice candidates. So if they run, and let's just say like all the first choice candidates, they're counted. And if anybody receives over 50%, then it's just over. So it could be over today. Let's say like Cuomo gets 50%, 51%, it's over, he wins. But if there's not a majority, this is when it gets very, very interesting. If there's not a majority, then they go step by step from the lowest ranked candidate, and they move those votes up in round 1, round 2. So let's just say, I think there's 11 candidates. So it would be 11. They take the 11 candidates, they take the lowest ranked ones, and whoever the second choice candidate is, in the next round, those votes would be moved up. So I'm going to give the example that's quite interesting, because there's a candidate called Brad Lander, who's a very progressive candidate, and he's in a coalition with Mamdani, meaning that they've kind of like said, hey, if you don't vote for me, vote for him. If you don't vote, and so a lot in this example is Lander's doing pretty well. I think he's like the 3rd ranked candidate. And because they've cross-endorsed, as this ranked choice plays out, and we'll put up this chart here so you can take a look at it. As this plays out, as the votes get counted and each candidate is eliminated, the votes move to the second choice candidate. So if I'll give this example, if your vote is number 1, Eric Adams, number 2, Mamdani, number 3, Cuomo, by the time Eric Adams gets eliminated, which he will get eliminated because he's not a top candidate, all the people who voted number 1 Adams, number 2 Mamdani, it moves, that vote goes to Mamdani.
I think the table, we'll display this table again and again. It's the best way to visualize what you're saying.
Yep. So this example in this table, even if Cuomo leads after round 1 at 36% and Mamdani's number 2, as you work through the rounds, specifically as different candidates get eliminated and those votes move up, by the end, Mamdani might be the number 1 because, example, he's got a coalition with Brad Lander, and most of the Lander voters will probably have put their second choice as Mamdani. So at the end, it might move, and he might move ahead and gain, like, let's just say like 11 points or 12 points to win this election. And the whole point of this ranked choice thing is to be able to give viability to candidates who might be more like, it doesn't punish people for voting for people who are a little bit further on the edges, because you can say, if we did ranked choice in the presidential election, right? People could vote for, it's just an example. If your first choice is Bernie Sanders, and or if your first choice was like a Green Party candidate, you could vote for that Green Party candidate and then put your second choice as the next, like the Democrat or the Republican, and to signal who you are more aligned with. So you're not punished for your initial vote. So I think that that's actually something good here, but it could lead to a crazy outcome and a massive change in New York City.
And I think it's important to note, at least the way I look at it, it's kind of similar to a parliament in many European countries where you have, it's not like a two-party system. You have multiple candidates, and specifically, we've talked about Germany, how the AfD actually came in second place for their most recent election, but the winning party within Germany excluded the AfD from any seats in parliament because they blocked him out, because the coalition excluded the AfD party. And this is what you're saying right now, which is Mamdani has a coalition of other candidates in his same party that he will likely...
Yeah, they've just cross-endorsed.
Right.
And they've been like, listen, if you don't vote for me, vote for him.
Right.
And we're more aligned. So if you like me, make sure your second choice is him, because if I don't win, then I want him to win.
And then the unspoken word is that Mamdani's obviously going to put those people that were in his coalition who maybe didn't win the election somewhere in office when he gets elected.
Yeah, exactly. Or just they're like, hey, I'm going to be mostly aligned with this guy, so if you like this stuff. But this is very interesting, and I think the other part that's confusing about these types of elections, they can take weeks to play out. So if there's not a majority on day 1, this might take the next 2 weeks to vote, because they have to go round by round, re-examine all of them, and move the votes up. But my big takeaway from this is, if Mamdani wins, Cody's real estate prices go way up.
Yeah.
So you're probably voting, you're probably hoping for Mamdani, because Mamdani wins, Palm Beach continues to go higher.
I'm going to become a New York State illegal voter just to go up there and no, I mean, the American part of me says, no, I don't want them to win. I don't think this is good for America. And obviously people are going to say, well, New York City isn't America, but it kind of is, because New York City really is, it's the most important city, one of the most important cities in the world. And if we have the new leader of that city proposing policies that not only they're literally communist. He wants a government-run chain of grocery stores. I watched a whole video of that.
Yeah, to take profits from private ones to fund the public grocery store.
Not only is that the government getting involved in commerce and price, basically manipulation, but it's also hurting the companies that are private and trying to compete. They're not They're not going to be able to compete. So every single one of his policies has been played out in cities throughout the US and through cities throughout the world, and they don't work. They just
Not
don't work.
necessarily in the US, but around the world.
Well, no, some of the policies, like, for example, rent control. You can look at cities like Santa Monica in California or San Francisco, where you look at these real estate owners who have had tenants in their buildings or in their units or in their home for 20 or 30 years, and they're unable to adjust the rent to their tenant. Meanwhile, you have property taxes going up at a capped rate. And so the property owner is stuck because they cannot actually capture the yield on what they're renting out. To make it even worse,
and what happens is the apartments deteriorate.
Apartments deteriorate, but also when you then the even more dangerous thing is the real estate owner. If you then sell your property, not only can you not sell it because nobody wants to buy it, but the next owner of that property is still capped with that same tenant. And in the case of cities like Santa Monica or San Francisco, or there's dozens of cities throughout the US who've been in this situation, they provide buyout offers to these tenants, sometimes for hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, just to buy the person out so they can get a new tenant in to readjust the capped rate. And the point with all of this is this just doesn't work. It does not work. I think it's very nice in theory, just like communism. Sounds great. Let's have everyone share everything and everyone plays into the system. And
the outcome of most of these policies typically leads to higher prices, not lower prices.
Yes.
It's one of those things. It's like with aid in Africa. It sounds nice, but the second order consequences are usually the opposite of what people typically expect.
And the grocery store, grocery store example. Well, grocery stores throughout the U.S., their margins are razor thin. They're like 1 or 2%. So you're now going to have a government entity competing with companies that already have razor thin margins. They're going to throw their hands up and say, "I'm out. I don't want to do business in New York City." So let's just
less supply.
Yeah, and then you have the government
prices.
running the markets, and they're going to raise the prices because they're not competitive anymore, and they're going to have to raise the prices in order for them to not lose money. And then you don't have a system that's competing, and the one that loses out is the consumer. And that's
the part that's most interesting to me in this as well is that when they polled a lot of the voters, Mamdani is leading in people making over $100,000 in New York City, and also young people. Cuomo is actually winning minority votes, the black vote. Like, it's split in a way that you wouldn't expect it, right? The policies of Mamdani are designed to help people who have less income. They're focused on like the workers, but the workers are actually voting for Cuomo, the working class voting for Cuomo, where the young people and the wealthier white vote is voting for Mamdani. So it's extremely confusing here, and I'm interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, so the joke you made just a little bit ago about Palm Beach real estate going up, a lot of hedge funds have left New York. They're calling South Florida Wall Street South now. If you come to West Palm Beach, this was a more or less sleepy city 5 years ago. It's booming. We have multiple high rises. We have all the hedge funds moving down here. You have, even from Chicago, same thing. You have, Ken Griffin from Citadel that's come down. You have, BlackRock and Morgan Stanley. Basically, all of the major banks and hedge funds have either moved all their operations to South Florida, or they've moved themselves, like individual, like the actual owners of these companies have come to Florida, or they've moved some satellite offices down here. And you made a joke about real estate prices going up. I actually think that Florida real estate is on a precipice right now. It's increased in price to an unsustainable level, similar to Austin and similar to these other boomtown cities. And man, this could push it even further over the edge with more New Yorkers coming down to Palm Beach, which I'm like, on one hand, I'm like mixed emotions about it. But the guy who's been really vocal about it is Bill Ackman. And if anybody's on X or anybody who follows finances, he's an activist investor, right? So he gets involved in companies and tries to obviously boost their value because he takes a big stake in them. By the way, Ackman's biggest new investment, I think $2.2 billion, is in Uber. So anybody who wants to follow or ride the coattails of Ackman, go buy Uber. But he's getting involved somewhat in this mayoral race and just saying, like, this guy can't win. Mamdani cannot win. If he wins, we're going to have serious problems here. And the running joke with Ackman is, dude, you're like the last guy in New York who's, massively wealthy and running a fund. Like, you're going to leave. Like, what are you still doing there? It's time to leave. You're the last rat to jump off the ship.
My prediction is Cuomo wins. We'll see in the next 2 weeks. And I would be very surprised, even though Mamdani's kind of playing it. It would shock me if Mamdani wins. But yeah, well, we will see. We'll continue to talk about this as it's interesting because it's going to potentially shift. I think it'll give us insight into what's going to happen in other large cities in the U.S. As it's the second order consequences of Trump being elected nationally, right? That's like if Trump doesn't win, I don't think Mamdani's anywhere close.
I don't know what's going to happen. I don't really have a
Yeah.
dog in the fight. Other than being an American, I don't think this is good for America.
Other than being an American who owns real estate in Palm Beach.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, yeah.
Other than a big dog in the fight.
But other than what's going on in New York, I think what just happened in the Middle East, let's just cross our fingers that peace remains there. Quick mention about U.S. markets. They're back up, and we're now at 203% GDP to debt ratio, which is our record high ever in the U.S. was in November of last year at 204%. We're now at 203%. So we're back near record highs of
Kicking
GDP
the can,
to
baby.
debt. Kicking the can. I think that a lot of people want to argue that the debt to GDP ratio metric is kind of outdated and something we shouldn't look at. Maybe that is. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will say that is a very standardized metric that's easy to look at. And the reality is our markets are back up at crazy valuations. And while all this is happening, there are many things that are very inexpensive right now, like the commodity sector, like energy. And I think, for the long term, for the next several years, it's going to be pretty wise to put some capital towards these undervalued areas right now. Platinum ripping right now, up almost 40% year to date. Silver, same. And I think those have a lot more to run for the next couple of years. So if you're a contrarian, there's some big opportunities right now.
Well, good stuff from Cody Platinum Shirk.
I put my money where my mouth is. I'm happy this year.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you did, go subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or whatever you listen to this episode on. Share it with somebody. We will see you guys on the next episode.
See ya.